This is a brief introduction to an issue that some of us have been discussing, and it's a very interesting issue for us. And this issue is the diversity of the black Hebrews or Hebrews who acknowledge themselves, or those blacks who acknowledge themselves to be Hebrews. That there's a diversity, a great diversity actually. I don't think it has actually been really seriously looked at, especially amongst those who are not Hebrews or those who don't regard us as Hebrews, because there's many people who would say that we as blacks in the West are not Hebrews, and that's a different sort of discussion and even a debate. That's on a different sort of level. What we want to just introduce here, and this is just a brief introduction, is the diversity of black Hebrews, or the black Hebrew diversity, that we as black Hebrews are diverse. And they said that diversity is strength, that there's strength in our diversity. But the first thing we need to do is to come to the acknowledgement that we are so diverse as a people. And there's different, for example, if you go on the internet, even the YouTubes, and you put in black Hebrews, you probably will find the videos and the postings from some of our, for lack of a better word, let's call them extremists. I wouldn't call them fanatics. Some would say they're fanatics. Our enemies will call those black Hebrew Israelites who are extreme in their positions and extreme in their points of view, would call them fanatics or radicals. I think that we live in radical times. We live in extraordinary times. So therefore it says that extraordinary measures, extraordinary times require, and they call for extraordinary measures. So we live in extraordinary times or radical times. Therefore, some people will be radical. There are people who are radical about their support of America, even fanatical, and radical about, Western culture and democracy and so forth and so on. These are things they believe in, and they're not willing to take or accept any quarter to that. So we as black Hebrews, and we use this term fairly loosely, but so that the listener can understand who we're speaking about in a general sense, because there's a lot of details that are often avoided in this discussion of black people, or so-called African Americans, or the descendants of the enslaved Africans, or of the black Hebrews who were brought over here to the West. And we have many different, for lack of a better word, some will call it groups. We'll use the terminology camps. They're in different camps, and there's different points of view concerning our Hebrewness. And we need to really, first of all, as black Hebrews, or Hebrews who are called black people, we need to first of all acknowledge this, and not to become polarized against each other. And this is not saying that we're going to get to a point where we all will agree absolutely on all things as Hebrews. But the first thing we have to acknowledge is our diversity. And coupled with that is the strength that there is in diversity. And I personally have come to the acceptance and acknowledgement that this is all part of the Almighty's will for us as a people, especially in the diaspora, that we do have such diversity, that we are not a so-called monolith. Even if you just look at the basics, there's the BetaIsrael, and there are 12 tribes. Could this diversity of us be the different tribes of the Hebrews in another way of interpretation, in another way of manifestation? This all should be considered. But the basic subject matter, the basic point of this particular posting is to point out our diversity as black Hebrews and the black Hebrew diversity. That we have like we said already, we have those who may be considered to be more extremist amongst us, or fundamentals, or even more radical. The word fanatical, let's not use that even when we speak of certain groups that are very much extreme, because people don't understand what even fanatical actually means, until we can get to the root of these meanings. We shouldn't really use them, especially about our own people, even if our own people may not accept us. I just laugh because it's interesting that we have those black Hebrews who would say we as Ethiopian Hebrews are not really Hebrews, and then vice versa, so forth and so on. But that's just Satan. That's just the adversary and the enemy attempting, once again, even from within us, amongst us, to divide and conquer us. You see, if any of the various camps and groups and schools of thought of Hebrew Israelites are not willing to acknowledge that there are other camps and groups of Hebrew Israelites that have chosen or have accepted certain facts or certain interpretations concerning who we are that may differ from their particular group or camp, we cannot disavow them as children of Abraham. We can't disavow them as descendants of Israel. What we must seek to do is, first of all, to recognize our diversity. First of all, recognize it. Do our best to even, let's take a look at this diversity. For example, on the Wikipedia page, if you look up black Hebrews, and there's another page I think is called African Hebrews or African Israelites, you might find a little bit posted concerning some of the patriarchs or the ancestors of this movement, some of the first brothers who were the first proclaimers of this identity, such as Brother Crowdy, and we have Wentworth Arthur Matthews, known to some of us as Rabbi Matthews. Then we come further down to the modern times, the later times, and we have ones like Ben Ami. We also have like the Yahweh Ben Yahweh. And if we continue, we have some of the more moderate. We have our moderates like Michelle Obama's, the president's wife's cousin. I think he's a cousin once removed, they say. What they call Rabbi Funay. He's one of the more, we may term him more of the more moderate Israelites. Some would say middle of the road. Black Hebrews. And then, of course, we have our more extreme, the extreme vanguard of the Hebrews, those brothers that may be in Times Square or may gather in some of the grand concourses and just give it to the people, and even to us too, because they're ignorant about the half of the story, the other half. They're ignorant about some of the other Israelites. They are so caught up in the fact that they can identify with our black Hebrew, our Hebrew identity, that they will willingly ignore those of us who may be more refined in our knowledge and definition. We include and are inclusive of the basics that they hold to. But we basically say we have to continue to grow to recognize the great diversity of the black Hebrews. And this is why I think such a post is not only timely, but very important for us, especially in this present time that we're in. We got to recognize that our strength as Hebrews, as black Hebrews, lies in our diversity. And to begin to recognize this diversity and really check out what certain different groups or camps really think and why they have the particular interpretations they do, and to find points of common ground among the Hebrews, the black Hebrews in particular, in the West, because it's very important. Otherwise, we will be ignoring the very word that we say prophecy has fulfilled concerning us, which is Torah and the Nabiyat, or the Nabim, as you would say, or Navim, as some of the moderates choose to speak it, like the Ashkenazis. You know, that's their choice. But we need to recognize our diversity. So this is an introduction to hopefully a more expanded dissertation and thesis concerning the black Hebrew diversity and the diversity of we as the Falashas, or the exiles, those who are exiled in the Western Hemisphere, because it's true that strength, and our strength in particular, lies in our diversity. And once we come to that recognition of our diversity and learn to have a more family orientation, just like the 12 tribes, they all wasn't from the same tribe, and not just look at the tribe in the narrow sense of some interpretations, but look at one form of the manifestation of us being in many tribes, or 12 tribes, is the fact of our diversity. See, our diversity, the different Hebrew Israelite groups, are the different Hebrew Israelite groups is the manifestation of this diversity. The fact that there are 12 tribes, and the fact that there are different groups. This is proof positive, but each group, or many groups, should we say, are saying that, well, we are the real Hebrews, our group, our camp, and the next camp or group is not, because if they're not down with us, then that means they're not really real. Hakim, that's not your call, brothers. That's not your call to decide whether we are Hebrews. I mean, we already have our enough problems, or challenges rather, with the Gentiles and with the confused Negroes, you know, our confused people that don't want to recognize who they are, to encounter these sort of problems with those of us who at least we agree on the basics, that the people brought over to the Americas and the Caribbean were by and large, were the BetaIsrael, or the Hebrew Israelites, and that our experience in America is biblical as black people. Our experience in the Americas and Caribbean is a biblical prophetic fulfillment, and that there are other Hebrew Israelites as well around the world, especially in Africa, although some would say they are Hamites. That's one interpretation which is heavily influenced by European bias and by the European mind and the European interpretation of our scriptures. While we were lost, they came into our scriptures and basically have interpreted certain things which really favor their worldview. And some of us, in reclaiming our culture and our heritage, have had to go through a lot of their research, and some things we have not weeded out properly. We have not sifted. We have not gleaned properly, and we need to, regurgitate, just like that. The clean animals, we need to regurgitate it and chew it again, and chew the cud, and to meditate on this. So, brothers, I hope that you are able to consider this very important issue, our diversity. And though you may belong to one particular group, and and the other brothers may belong to another group, please open your eyes. Don't remain blind. Recognize our diversity. Just like there are 12 tribes of Israel, do not just think that the 12 tribes mean that you are from a particular nation only, because we have to understand the levels of interpretation of Scripture. Yes, there's the literal level, you understand, but then there are the other levels of interpretation that equally applies. Otherwise, you're not really worthy to carry this word, you see. So we have to recognize that, not just looking at the natural interpretation, but also look at the spiritual interpretation of this matter, that some, though recognizing they are Hebrews, in spirit they are with one particular group of Hebrews or those who recognize that they are Israelites, but the commonality, the common ground, the commonwealth that we share must be protected and must be valued, and that is our identification of ourselves in this diaspora as Hebrews and as BetaIsrael or Israel in this present time, in this dispensation. So, more to come. This was just an introduction. Sorry if I've been a little bit long-winded on this particular subject matter right here, but the diversity, our diversity, is something that is close, near, and dear to I and I hearts. And we looked around and didn't really find too many of us talking about that. You know, we're being radicalized against each other. We're being divided and conquered against each other when really we're all in the same boat and the same situation, especially as recognized Hebrews, as ones who recognize themselves as Hebrews. That already separates us from the Goy and the Goyim and the nations, the other nations. Now, in our nation, we got to see who's who, you understand, and begin to have some dialogue, constructive dialogue with each other, you understand, and even have some sort of honor, some, as we used to say in the world, a respect for the fact that these brothers, if they acknowledge they're Hebrews, that automatically shows that they must be on some higher level. Now we have to then decide and discuss, well, what are you talking about? And how come you don't recognize, say, for example, let me say, us as Rastafari, you understand, who acknowledge ourselves as Hebrews? Why don't you acknowledge the King of Kings? And let's discuss these things. Let's work these things out. All right? So more to come. Hopefully, Yah willing. Stay tuned. Give thanks. Shalom.